My wife lied to me to hook up with her brother-in-law. I only found out when they got into an accident, so I served her divorce papers while she was in a hospital bed. Hey Reddit, buckle up, because this one's going to make your last relationship look like a Hallmark movie. I found out my wife was sleeping with her sister's husband because a nurse figured I should know the name of the guy with her when their car wrapped around a telephone pole at 2 in the morning. That one sentence blew up 2 marriages before the sun came up. My name is Dante, 33 male. I work as an operations coordinator for a regional freight company, which is a fancy way of saying I'm the guy who fixes everything when trucks break down, shipments get lost, and warehouse managers start losing their minds at 3 a.m. The job pays decent, and it trained me to stay calm when everything goes sideways. Celeste and I had been together for 6 years, married for 4. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, which meant a lot of time on the road, conferences, client dinners, overnights in other cities. She had an answer for everything, a smile that could disarm anyone, and this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. I thought I was lucky, thought I'd found someone who actually wanted to build something real. Her older sister Lucia had married a guy named Graham about 8 years back. They had a nice house in the suburbs, 2 kids aged 6 and 4, the whole domestic package. Graham worked in commercial real estate, which he reminded everyone about constantly. The guy couldn't order a sandwich without mentioning his latest deal, or his newest client, or how the market was treating him so well. Always wore expensive watches, always drove fancy cars. I found him exhausting, but he was family, so I nodded along at holidays and pretended to be impressed when he talked about cap rates and leveraged buyouts. Lucia seemed happy. The kids were great. That's what mattered. That Friday evening started normally enough. I'd pulled a brutal shift dealing with 3 trucks that broke down on the same route, which meant 10 hours of phone calls and creative problem solving. All I wanted was food, a shower, and my couch. Celeste was already packed when I walked in, overnight bag by the door, keys in her hand. She gave me this apologetic look and said she was driving up to spend the weekend with Lucia. Said Graham was traveling for work again, and Lucia was overwhelmed handling the kids alone. I didn't think twice. Sounded like something a good sister would do. I helped carry her bag to the car, asked if she needed gas money. She laughed, kissed my cheek, and told me I worried too much. Promised to text when she arrived. I watched her pull out of the driveway, waved like a good husband, and went inside to microwave some leftover pasta. She texted around 8, said she'd arrived safely, sent a photo of what looked like Lucia's living room. I sent back a thumbs up and passed out. Around 2 in the morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. The woman on the other end had that calm, measured voice medical professionals use when they're about to drop a bomb on you. She confirmed I was Dante Ortega, confirmed I was Celeste Ortega's husband. Then she told me my wife had been admitted to County General following a vehicle accident about an hour ago. Stable, but injured. I needed to come in. My stomach dropped. My wife was hurt. Could have died. Then the nurse added something that completely messed with my head. She told me my wife wasn't alone in the vehicle. The other passenger was a Mr. Graham Whitmore. He'd also been injured and was being treated in the ER. I didn't respond for what felt like a full minute. Just stood there in my dark living room, phone pressed to my ear, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Graham Whitmore, my wife's brother-in-law, Lucia's husband, the guy who was supposedly on a work trip, in a car with my wife, at 2 in the morning, on a highway that led nowhere near Lucia's house. The nurse asked if I was still on the line. I managed to say yes. She asked if I'd be coming to the hospital tonight. Said Celeste was asking for me. Said she seemed confused and scared. I thanked the nurse for calling. Said I appreciated the information. She started to add something about Celeste needing family support, but I hung up before she finished. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and stared at the wall while my phone buzzed with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. My wife had lied about visiting her sister. Her sister's husband had lied about a work trip. Both of them had somehow ended up wrapped around a telephone pole together in the middle of the night. The math wasn't complicated. I wasn't going anywhere until I understood exactly what I was dealing with, and exactly how badly I'd been played. I waited until 6 in the morning to make the call. Figured Lucia would be awake by then, probably dealing with breakfast and getting the kids ready for whatever Saturday activities they had planned. She answered on the second ring. I kept my voice casual, asked if Celeste was up yet, if they'd had a good night, if Lucia needed anything. Long pause. She sounded confused. She said Celeste wasn't there, hadn't seen her in almost 2 weeks. Asked if everything was okay, because I was acting weird. I kept my voice steady. I asked where Graham was. Said I'd been trying to reach him about something and couldn't get through. Just wanted to make sure he was okay. Another pause. Then Lucia said Graham was in Denver on a work trip, had left Thursday evening, wouldn't be back until Monday. Some big commercial deal he'd been working on for months. Denver? Right. I thanked her, told her everything was fine, said I must have gotten my wires crossed, hung up before she could ask more questions. So there it was. Double confirmation. I called the police non-emergency line around 8 and asked where vehicles from overnight accidents got towed. They gave me the address of an impound lot on the east side of town. Showered, put on real clothes, drank coffee that tasted like motor oil, drove to the impound lot around 9. The car was in the back corner, near a chain link fence covered in dead weeds. Even from a distance, I could tell it was bad. Up close, it was worse. The front end crumpled like a crushed soda can. The windshield shattered. Dried blood on the headrests, the dashboard, the steering wheel. Glass everywhere, glittering in the morning sun. The driver's side door was bent inward at an angle that made my stomach turn. I walked around the wreck slowly, photographing everything with my phone. According to the incident report posted on the officer's clipboard, they'd been heading southbound on Route 12 around 1:45 a.m. Speed estimated at 70 in a 45 zone. Celeste had been driving, lost control on a curve, hit a telephone pole on the passenger side, spun twice before landing in a drainage ditch. The responding officer noted it was a miracle anyone survived. Another foot to the left and Graham's side would have been completely crushed. The overnight bag was still in the back seat. Celeste's bag, partially unzipped with clothes spilling out. I opened the rear door and pulled it toward me. Lingerie. There was a smaller toiletry bag too. Protection. Massage oil. Scented candles. Travel size everything. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This wasn't a mistake made in a fog of bad judgment. This was planned, down to the last detail. I photographed everything. The luggage. The contents. Every incriminating item. Then I noticed something wedged between the front seats. A leather portfolio. Graham's initials embossed in gold on the corner, because of course they were. I pulled it out and flipped through it. Mostly business cards and real estate flyers. A few handwritten notes I couldn't make sense of. But one thing caught my eye. A business card from a loan officer at Pacific Trust Mortgage, with my home address scribbled on the back in Graham's handwriting. My address. On a mortgage company business card. In Graham's folder. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I photographed the card, put everything back exactly where I'd found it, and walked back to my truck. The smart move was to start documenting, build a complete picture before making any decisions. I needed help. Someone who could think clearly when I couldn't. Someone who'd help me turn raw information into a plan. I called my buddy Zach. Zach and I had worked together at the freight company for going on 7 years now. Former Marine. I told him about everything. The hospital call. The double lie. The impound lot. The business card from the mortgage company with my address on the back. When I finished, he took a long sip of his coffee, set down the mug, and gave me 4 words that stuck with me. Document everything. Trust nothing. We spent the next 4 hours building a timeline. Celeste and I had separate phone plans through our employers, but I knew her login credentials from when I'd helped her set up autopay a couple years back. Pulled up her account on my laptop and started downloading records. The pattern was obvious once you knew what to look for. Hundreds of calls to Graham's number over the past 6 months. Some just a few minutes, some lasting over an hour. Heavy clusters on Tuesdays and Thursdays around noon. Her lunch breaks. She'd been calling her sister's husband while I ate sandwiches at my desk and thought about what we'd have for dinner. The texts were worse. The phone company only had metadata, not content, but the sheer volume told its own story. Sometimes 40 messages in a single day. Sometimes at 2 in the morning when she was supposedly asleep next to me. I remembered those nights. She'd get up saying she couldn't sleep. Said she was going to get water or read in the living room. Sometimes I'd find her on the couch in the morning, phone face down on the cushion beside her. I cross-referenced the call logs with her work calendar. Every overnight trip she'd taken in the past 6 months matched with heavy phone activity to Graham. Every conference, every client dinner, every weekend with girlfriends. There was one week in April where she'd supposedly been at a pharmaceutical summit in Houston. That week showed 50 calls to Graham's number and exactly 0 calls to anyone in the Houston area code. Zach found Graham's social media and started cross-referencing. Turned out Graham had posted a photo from a steakhouse in Houston the exact same week. Different account, different platform, but same city and same dates. I moved on to credit cards. Celeste and I kept our finances mostly separate, just combined for household expenses. I hadn't looked at her personal statements in years. Turns out she had a credit card I didn't even know about. Statements going to her work email. I only found it because her phone account included a list of linked financial services. The charges told their own story. Hotel rooms I'd never been to. Restaurants in cities where no conferences existed. A couple's massage at some boutique spa. Jewelry purchases I'd never seen her wear. 7 months minimum. This had been going on for at least 7 months. 7 months of looking me in the face every morning and pretending everything was fine. 7 months of coordinated lies and shared calendars while I thought we were building a real life together. Zach pulled up public records on Graham's real estate company. It took about 15 minutes to find something interesting. Graham Whitmore Holdings, LLC had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection 9 months ago. Public record. His business was drowning in debt from bad investments and a commercial project that went sideways during the downturn. Suddenly, the timeline made sense. Graham's empire collapses. Graham needs cash. He starts an affair with his wife's sister, who happens to be married to a guy with a fully paid-off inherited house worth around $320,000. That mortgage company business card with my address on it suddenly looked a lot more sinister. I didn't know exactly what they'd been planning yet, but I had a bad feeling about it. Zach told me I should freeze my credit right away. Put alerts on all accounts. Check with my bank to make sure nothing had been started without my knowledge. Around 3 in the afternoon, Zach looked up from his laptop and asked if I'd told Lucia yet. I hadn't. Kept putting it off, dreading that conversation more than anything else. Lucia didn't deserve this. She'd built her whole life around Graham and those kids. Trusted him completely. Same way I'd trusted Celeste. I sent her a text asking her to call when she had a few minutes alone. Told her it was important. Added that it wasn't good news. She called within an hour. Said Graham still wasn't answering his phone. Said she was starting to worry because his hotel in Denver had no reservation under his name. I took a breath. Told her there was no Denver trip. Then I told her everything. The hospital call. The crash. Graham in the car with Celeste at 2 in the morning. The overnight bag with its carefully packed contents. The 7 months of phone records. The matching travel dates. All of it. Silence for a long time. She asked if I was sure. I told her I had photos. Told her I had phone records and credit card statements and travel calendars. Told her I'd seen the car with my own eyes. More silence. Then she said things had been off with Graham for months. Late nights he couldn't explain. Secretive phone calls he'd take outside or in the garage. New clothes and watches she didn't remember buying him. Charges on their joint card that didn't make sense. She'd told herself she was being paranoid. Told herself no man would do something that messed up. Sleep with his wife's own sister. Who does that? Graham, apparently. I told her I'd thought the same thing about Celeste. Told her we'd both been played by people who were supposed to have our backs. She asked what I was going to do. I told her I was hiring a divorce attorney in the morning and locking down every financial account I had. She said she needed time to process. Figure out what to tell the kids. How to handle Graham? I understood. Told her to call if she needed anything. After we hung up, Zach and I spent another 2 hours organizing everything into folders. Physical copies, digital backups, cloud storage he set up under an email Celeste didn't know existed. The affair evidence was solid, but that business card with my address kept bugging me. Graham was broke. His business was going under. And somehow my house had ended up in his folder. Whatever they'd been planning, the car crash had interrupted it. I just didn't know how close I'd come to finding out the hard way. Monday morning, I started making the calls Zach had suggested. The first call was to my bank. I asked to speak with someone about my account security. Got transferred twice. Finally ended up with a manager in the fraud department. She asked me to verify my identity, which took about 5 minutes. Then she asked if I was calling about the HELOC application. I felt my stomach drop. What HELOC application? She explained that an application for a home equity line of credit had been started on my property 4 weeks ago. Listed me as the primary borrower. Listed a Celeste Ortega as co-borrower. The requested amount was $85,000. My house. The house I'd inherited from my grandmother. The house Celeste had no legal claim to whatsoever. The manager kept talking. Said the application had been flagged for additional verification because the co-borrower's name didn't appear anywhere on the property deed. They'd been trying to reach me for 2 weeks to confirm authorization, but the contact number on file had been changed to one that kept going to voicemail. Changed. She knew my info. We'd done paperwork at that kitchen table 100 times. I'd never thought to hide anything from my own wife. I asked her to freeze everything immediately. She did. Then she mentioned something else. Someone had also requested an address change on my account around the same time. Tried to redirect all my statements to a P.O. box in a town I'd never heard of. If the application had gone through, I never would have seen the statements. Never would have known until the debt collectors came calling. I thanked her, hung up, and immediately called my credit card company. 40 minutes on hold listening to the worst jazz fusion ever recorded. I can reroute 3 broken down trucks across state lines faster than these people can answer a phone. At one point, the sax started going off on some solo, and I almost confessed to crimes I didn't commit just to make it stop. Finally got through to a representative who confirmed someone had attempted to add Celeste Ortega as an authorized user on my personal credit card 3 weeks prior. The request had been flagged because the social security number provided didn't match anyone on the account. Same time frame, same pattern, same person. I froze everything. Put fraud alerts on all 3 credit bureaus. Changed every password. Then I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the mortgage company business card I'd found in Graham's folder. Pacific Trust Mortgage. The same company that had just tried to process an $85,000 HELOC on my grandmother's house. That was the plan. Zach came over that evening and helped me organize all the new documentation. Fraud alerts, credit freezes, bank correspondence. We added it to the timeline. The picture was getting clearer and uglier by the hour. Graham needed money because his business was going down the drain. Celeste either got roped in or came up with the idea herself. Either way, they'd been working together for months to set up a major cash grab. My grandmother's house was the target. They just needed me out of the way long enough to drain the equity and disappear. Zach asked if I thought Celeste was planning to leave me eventually. I said I didn't know. Maybe she was planning to take the money and file for divorce. Maybe she was planning to take the money and stay married while Graham dealt with his own situation separately. Maybe they were planning to run off together and leave both me and Lucia holding the bag. It doesn't matter now. They weren't planning anything anymore. Wednesday morning, I drove downtown and met with a divorce attorney named Pete. I showed him everything: phone records, credit card statements, HELOC documents, fraud alerts, the organized timeline Zach and I had built over 2 days of digging. Pete reviewed it all without any visible reaction. It took about 90 minutes. When he finished, he looked up and nodded once. He said I had one of the cleanest separate property cases he'd seen in years, plus solid grounds for a fault-based divorce with fraud implications. He laid out the strategy. The house was separate property, inherited before marriage, never mixed with marital assets. Celeste had no legal claim to it under state law. The attempted HELOC was evidence of financial fraud. The affair gave grounds for fault-based divorce, which would affect how assets got divided. Pete said he could have papers ready by Friday. Asked if I had any preferences on how Celeste should be served. I thought about it for a long time. Lucia had called me that morning. Said she was going to the hospital Thursday to confront Graham. Said she couldn't do it alone. Asked if I'd be there. If I was going anyway, I figured I might as well make the trip count. I told Pete to have everything ready by Thursday afternoon. Told him I wanted her served at the hospital, in person, with witnesses. He just wrote it down and said he'd arrange a process server. By Thursday, Celeste had been moved out of the ICU. Broken ribs, fractured collarbone, concussion, stitches across her forehead. She'd be in the hospital another week minimum. Graham was in worse shape, shattered pelvis, internal bleeding, some kind of spinal compression issue. Months of recovery ahead. Might not walk normally again. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Celeste's parents had been calling me nonstop since the accident. Her mother cried about how scared Celeste was, how she kept asking why I hadn't visited, how I was being cruel and vindictive for no reason. Her father left voicemails calling me cold, heartless, and unworthy of their daughter. One rough patch. That's what they called it. Every family goes through challenges. Marriage requires forgiveness. I ignored the voicemails. Didn't respond. They didn't know about Graham yet. Lucia wanted to be the one to tell them. Wanted to see their faces when they realized their precious son-in-law had been sleeping with their other daughter. Thursday afternoon, I drove to the hospital with Pete's process server following in a separate car. Guy named Raymond. Lucia met me in the parking lot, dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking when she reached for a hug. She told me she'd already been to see Graham that morning. Walked into his room, looked him in the eye, and told him she knew everything. He denied it at first. Said there must be some misunderstanding. Said Celeste was like a sister to him. When Lucia brought up the phone records, he switched tactics. Said Celeste had seduced him. Said she'd been coming on to him for months and he'd finally caved. When Lucia brought up the HELOC documents, he stopped talking entirely. She'd left without saying another word. Said she'd filed for divorce that afternoon. Her attorney was already drawing up custody arrangements. Now it was Celeste's turn. Celeste was sitting up in bed when we entered. Bruises across her face. Arm in a sling. Hospital gown hanging off one shoulder. She looked smaller. When she saw me, Her whole expression changed, relief washing over her face like I was the answer to every prayer she'd been whispering for the past 5 days. Dante. Her voice cracked on my name. You came. I've been asking for you for days. I didn't get why you weren't here. I was so scared. The nurses wouldn't tell me anything. I thought something had happened to you too. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. I thought you'd never come. She kept going, tears starting to form. I know I have stuff to explain. I know this looks bad, but it's not what you think. Please just let me explain. Everything got so messy and I didn't know how to tell you and… Celeste. I cut her off. Stop. She blinked, confusion replacing the desperate relief. Raymond stepped forward from behind me. Professional. Calm. He confirmed her full legal name. Confirmed she was Celeste Marie Ortega. Then he handed her the envelope and said the formal service statement. She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Then she looked up at me. Then at Lucia standing in the doorway. What is this? Her voice had changed. Harder. Lucia answered before I could. I know about Graham. About the hotel rooms. About the 7 months of calls and texts. About the HELOC application on Dante's house. About the credit card fraud. About all of it. Celeste's face went through about 6 different expressions in 3 seconds, finally landing on wounded innocence. That's not… You don't get it. Graham manipulated me. He told me how unhappy he was. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was confused, and he took advantage of… You packed lingerie. I kept my voice flat. You rented a P.O. box to redirect my mail. You tried to add yourself to my credit cards. You started a home equity loan on property you have no legal right to. This wasn't confusion. This was planning. Celeste opened her mouth to respond, but Lucia cut her off. You're not my sister anymore. The words just hung there. Celeste's face crumpled. She started crying and reaching for Lucia, saying her name over and over, begging her to listen. Lucia turned and walked out without looking back. I followed. Celeste's voice echoed down the hallway behind us. A nurse hurried past us toward the room. I didn't turn around. Her parents called me that night, both of them on the line, furious beyond words. Said I'd ambushed their injured daughter in her hospital bed. Said I'd turned Lucia against her own sister with lies and manipulation. Said they'd always known there was something cold about me and now they had proof. I told them to ask their daughter about Graham, about the HELOC, about the 7 months of documented lies. They said I was making excuses. Said Celeste would never do something like that. Said I was trying to justify abandoning my injured wife. I told them to call Lucia and ask her directly. Then I hung up. 2 days later, Lucia filed for divorce from Graham. Celeste's parents stopped calling me after that. Guess they finally got the full picture. The next 4 months were basically watching 2 lives fall apart in slow motion. Celeste came home from the hospital and moved in with her parents. I'd already changed the locks on my grandmother's house and had a conversation with the local police about what counted as trespassing. She showed up anyway, twice the first week, 3 times the second. My neighbor Gene helped more than he probably realized. Retired electrician in his 60s, had security cameras covering his entire property, plus half of mine because he was paranoid about package thieves. The man had 7 cameras for a 3-bedroom house. Said he also didn't trust the squirrels, which I'd assumed was a joke until I saw the dedicated squirrel tracking angle on camera 4. When I mentioned the situation, he started logging every time Celeste's car appeared in the driveway. Dates, times, duration, license plate, everything. The 3rd week, Celeste walked up to the front door and knocked for 45 straight minutes. Gene had it all on camera. I was at work, but he called me to let me know she'd left a note on the door. Pete sent her attorney a cease and desist letter. She ignored it. The 5th week, she showed up around midnight. Gene's cameras caught everything. She tried the front door, tried the back door. Then she went to the garage and started yanking on the handle like she could force it open. When that didn't work, she kicked the bottom panel hard enough to dent the metal. Stood there for another 10 minutes, yelling at the house before finally driving off. After the garage door incident, Pete filed a formal no trespass order with the county sheriff's office. Celeste was served notice that any future presence on my property would result in criminal charges. Her attorney acknowledged receipt. The legal paper trail was airtight. I told Jean if she ever showed up again, don't argue with her. Just call. The visits continued anyway. Sometimes she'd just sit in her car across the street and stare at the house. Sometimes she'd walk past on the sidewalk, slow enough to make sure I noticed. I added all of it to the documentation file. The divorce proceedings moved faster than expected. Pete was thorough and aggressive. He filed citing fault-based grounds, attached evidence of the affair, and included the fraud documentation, also filed a motion to exclude the inherited house from asset division, citing separate property laws and documented fraud attempts. Celeste's attorney tried to fight everything. Guy named Hartwell. He claimed the house was marital property because we'd lived there together. Claimed the HELOC inquiry was a misunderstanding. Claimed Celeste was a victim of manipulation by Graham and shouldn't be held responsible for his schemes. Pete took apart every argument. He presented the phone records showing Celeste started most of the calls to Graham, presented credit card statements in her name, showing she'd paid for half their hotel rooms, presented the P.O. box rental in her name, the credit card authorization attempt in her name, the HELOC application with her signature. This wasn't manipulation. This was an equal partnership in betrayal. The judge reviewed everything over 2 sessions. Older woman with reading glasses and zero tolerance for excuses. She asked pointed questions about the HELOC timing, about the mail redirect, about why Celeste's name appeared on so many fraudulent documents if she was supposedly just an innocent victim. Celeste's attorney didn't have good answers. Final ruling came down in the 3rd session. The house was separate property. Fraud attempts counted as wasting marital assets. The judge ordered a 60-40 split in my favor, plus Celeste covering her own legal fees. Celeste actually laughed when she heard the ruling, said I'd stolen her best years and now I was stealing her future too. The judge reminded her that attempting to steal $85,000 from a spouse's inherited property generally doesn't get you a lot of sympathy from the court. Meanwhile, Lucia's divorce was getting messier. Graham tried every trick in the book, claimed bankruptcy meant he had nothing to divide, claimed his injuries from the accident prevented him from working, claimed Lucia was trying to turn the kids against him. Lucia's attorney dug into his finances and found accounts in his mother's name. Cash transfers made weeks before the crash. Cryptocurrency purchases that didn't appear on any disclosed statements. Graham had been setting up his exit for months. He was going to drain whatever he could and disappear to somewhere with weak extradition treaties. The crash ruined everything for him. His injuries were bad enough that he needed round-the-clock care for the first 2 months. Hard to disappear when you can barely stand. Hard to access your hidden accounts when your wife's attorney has frozen everything pending forensic accounting. Lucia got the house, primary custody of the kids, a judgment for back support that Graham would be paying for the next 16 years. His real estate company officially dissolved. His professional reputation was toast. Commercial real estate is a small world. Nobody wanted to work with the guy who ran a financial scam on his own brother-in-law while sleeping with his wife's sister. Graham moved in with his mother. Last I heard, he was doing basic paperwork at a friend's property management company from a wheelchair. Both divorces finalized the same week. Mine on Tuesday, Lucia's on Friday. I kept my house, my retirement, my sanity. Celeste got her share of our joint accounts minus fraud offsets. Moved back in with her parents permanently after getting let go from her pharmaceutical job during her extended medical leave. Zach came over the day my divorce was finalized, brought food, helped me rearrange furniture. 6 months after the accident, I decided to have some people over. Saturday afternoon, burgers on the grill. Lucia was coming with the kids. Zach was bringing his girlfriend. Gene said he might stop by if his back wasn't giving him trouble. The house looked different now. I'd repainted the bedroom, bought new furniture for the living room, took down the wedding photos. It finally felt like mine again. Lucia arrived around 3 with the girls. They ran straight for the backyard while Lucia helped me set up the food table. We talked about normal stuff, the kids' summer camp plans, how weird it was to be single again after so many years. We'd developed a strange kind of friendship over the past months. Just 2 people who understood what the other had been through in ways nobody else could. Zach showed up around 4 with his girlfriend and a cooler of sodas. Gene wandered over around 5, said his back was fine actually, and parked himself in a lawn chair with a burger and a satisfied look. It was nice, quiet, the kind of afternoon I hadn't had in years. Around 6, I noticed Gene looking toward the front of the house with his eyebrows raised. I followed his gaze. Celeste was walking up the driveway. She looked different, thinner, harder around the eyes, walking with a slight limp from the accident that probably wasn't going away. She was carrying a manila folder and wearing a dress I didn't recognize. I handed my spatula to Zach and walked around to intercept her before she could reach the backyard. She stopped about 15 feet away when she saw me coming. I've been trying to get a hold of you for 3 weeks. Her voice was steady, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this. You blocked my number. You blocked my email. You won't respond to anything. Because we're divorced. There's nothing to talk about. I disagree. My new attorney found problems with the property ruling. There are grounds to revisit the asset division. The fraud claims were exaggerated, and I was never given a fair chance to. Celeste! I cut her off. Pete already told me about your appeal attempt. It was denied. There's nothing to revisit. This is over. You need to leave. I'm not leaving until you hear me out. You owe me that much after 6 years together. I don't owe you anything. Turn around and walk away, or I'm calling the cops. Her expression shifted. You're really going to play victim here? After everything you did? You blindsided me in a hospital bed. You turned my sister against me. You took everything and left me with nothing. You were planning to take $85,000 from my inheritance. You packed your bag to go sleep with Lucia's husband. You spent 7 months lying to my face. Everything that happened to you, you did to yourself. That's when she noticed the people in the backyard. Noticed Lucia standing near the grill, watching. Something ugly crossed her face. You've got to be kidding me. Her voice got loud. She's here? In my grandmother-in-law's house? With my nieces? You're playing happy family with the people who ruined my life? Your life was ruined by your own choices. Leave now. Last warning. She started walking toward the backyard. I stepped in front of her. Move. She was practically spitting the word. No. Those are my nieces. I have every right to see them. You can't keep them from me forever. This is so messed up. This is my property and you're trespassing. Gene. Gene already had his phone out. Already on it. Celeste lost it. She started screaming about her rights, about how I couldn't do this to her, about how this house was supposed to be hers. She grabbed my arm hard. When I pulled away, she shoved me. Then she grabbed a garden stake from near the fence and threw it at the back door. Missed, but it left a gouge in the siding. Celeste went back and forth between screaming at me, screaming at Lucia through the fence, and trying to push past me toward the backyard. Zach had already moved the kids into the garage, out of sight. Jean was on the phone with dispatch. When the patrol car pulled up, Celeste was sitting on the ground near the driveway, makeup running down her face, mumbling about how everyone had betrayed her. The officer checked out the scene quickly, took statements from me and Jean, asked Celeste to stand and provide identification. She refused, said she had rights. The officer asked me to clarify. I told him we'd been divorced for 2 months and she'd been served a formal no trespass order through the sheriff's office after multiple documented violations. He turned back to Celeste and asked her politely to leave the property. She refused again, started yelling about lawyers and lawsuits and how everyone was going to pay for what they'd done to her. The officer warned her that refusing to leave private property after being asked by the owner was criminal trespass under state law. She called him a name I won't repeat. He cuffed her, put her in the back of the patrol car. As they drove away, Celeste was still yelling through the window. Something about how I'd regret this, how she'd make me pay, how this wasn't over. I watched until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Then I walked back to the grill, took the spatula from Zach, and asked if anyone needed a refill on their soda. Zach raised his cup. Lucia laughed for the first time all day. Jean said that was the most excitement he'd had in years. We finished dinner as the sun went down. Lucia left around 8 with the girls asleep in the back seat. Zach and his girlfriend headed out shortly after. Jean walked back to his place, said he'd send over the camera footage in case I needed it for court. I sat on my back porch alone as the last light faded. The house was quiet. Something that actually felt like home. Some people survive car crashes. I survived a marriage to someone I never really knew. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.